Dave Sobel is an expert in IT services. He has been a managed IT services provider for successful software companies, and his mission is to provide you with IT solutions that give you great business results. In this episode, we talk about the evolution of the IT services market, how small companies can improve their tech stacks, the practicalities of hybrid work, and the importance of diversity in IT leadership. We take a deep dive on industry trends in IT, and Dave gives advice for navigating the complex intersection of technology and business.
I knew I was going to be in computers since I was little. Like, it was just like, I'm a tech guy. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. And picked the major. I mean, I knew coming in that was my major, and I never deviated, and took a bunch of stuff around it because I have a liberal arts degree, but focused on that. And then if you'd ask college Dave like what I thought I was going to do, I probably would tell you like, oh, I'm going to be a programmer. I'm going to build products. I'm going to and that was the beginning of my career. I worked for a consulting firm to start things off. We did some product development, some consulting. Then I went to a firm that was we would now call it a cloud application service, like cloud SaaS, contract management stuff. But we were way ahead of our time and crashed and burned. So that's the version of my college experience was I know I want to be in technology, and computer science was the obvious major that associated with that.
So in college, though, you were doing a lot of things. You were a person that wasn't just always about their course and getting, all that work done. You were doing the college radio. And, what did that landscape look like back then? Was it just straight kind of FM, AM, over the radio waves, or was there internet radio by that point?
Oh God, no! I'm pre-internet radio. We were an FM station. We broadcast around the the radius of the college and a few miles beyond. You can go all the way into so we could get some of the local towns would get our stuff. And I mean, I'm just a music guy. I was a music buff. I'd done some live DJing in high school. I did some live DJing through college. I did a little bit post college, and it's more just I love music. Expressing yourself on the radio was a fun way of doing it. Met a bunch of my closest friends, who are still some of my closest friends to this day, through doing college radio. You get the you learn a lot, right? You learn a lot about managing your time and having a personality on air, and the dynamics of how production is done and that kind of stuff. But it was really just an outlet. It was a creative, fun outlet to enjoy music.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to have what I call a serious hobby, as in something that you take seriously and enjoy, but you don't have any kind of high dreams for it. Because, some people get into music or radio, I want to be the biggest radio DJ in the world, or I want to be a pop star. It's like, you know what? I'm just having fun. I'm enjoying this. And it's like you said, it's a creative outlet. And I'm curious, did you keep that going once you kind of went into the working world as an adult, or did it sort of fall away? I'm wondering what kind of your relationship
was. It split in that I would do some wedding work, and live event work post college. Literally, just friends of friends would know that a couple of I was the DJ for a number of my friends' weddings, right? Like that kind of stuff, and then friends of their friends, just because it was fun and it was a blade. And I threw party. I was a social guy. I threw parties post college, and I generally was the guy putting the music together for those. And that's morphed now into I do the playlists, and I do the design work. My wife and I host stuff. I do all the lighting and the music and the atmosphere and that kind of stuff. And so it was again just a fun way to get out there and meet people. I did some DJing between a friend's band's set post college. They were all in a band, a good cover band. The whole post-college scene for us, and I would DJ between there when they took a set break. And amusingly, that's how I met my wife, was at one of those gigs. The band was on, and a mutual friend introduced us, so it was just a good social outlet.
Cool. That's a good way to be, just to kind of, you have work and then you have this other thing that you're doing that you really enjoy, and I say really enjoy, you mostly enjoy, and then you keep that going. But you were also kind of very serious about your career, because a lot of people will get into a career and still have this kind of feeling of, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you were fully locked in when you were kind of working in the corporate space. I wonder if you can talk to me about the positions you held, the most senior ones, and how those businesses were and what you were doing day to day there.
You're so generous with the credit. I wish I could say that I was always that intensely serious. It's more the I like interesting stuff and I like challenging myself. I don't have some master plan. I just know I need to align myself and have a direction that makes sense. So, I was recruited for my first job out of school by a fellow William Mary alum who found me and liked and matched to my talents to their what they were doing. It was kind of a fun late '90s internet roller coaster. I was recruited to the next gig that I was at, where I was a product lead. And we were doing fun stuff during all that time frame. Like, I mean, I launched an e-commerce website for a major plastics manufacturer in the late 90s, before that was like when that was a unique thing to do, and not everybody had that. We did, really interesting internet domain space consulting for large pharmaceutical companies to help them guide their strategy. We did security consulting before that was a thing. Like, it was just this pile of interesting work. And then I got, did this product bit. And again, it was like we were trying this really interesting cloud-based service before we called it that. We built out our own data center. We built out our own security model. We had a complete signature solution for electronic. It was always just interesting work. But the lesson in particular that I learned in that second role was I learned the value of the business side of things. Because I got laid off. Like, we all lost our jobs on Valentine's Day of 2002
Wow.
when they let the whole development team go because we hadn't sold enough software. But management and sales kept their jobs. And I always quip that I learned that day that management and sales gets to keep their jobs. And I started my first business because I said, I can run a company into the wall just as easily as those idiots can. Like, but I get to keep my job. That seems like a better play. And that was sort of for me the pivot to entrepreneurism.
So what was the business that you started, and what was the kind of first day of it like, and the first month of it, going into the years that preceded it or went after it?
Terrifying. So I laugh. So I lost my job on Valentine's Day, and there's personal stuff there. But on the next day, I sort of committed. I was like, all right, I'm gonna give this a whirl. I'm gonna see if I can get a business off the ground. And if I haven't started generating serious revenue within sort of 60 to 90 days, I gotta go get a job. That was the thinking. And so I just started hustling. And my idea was, well, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. Let me see if I can figure out a way to help companies with their technology needs. That was my core basic idea. And I figured, you know what? It's just me. I'm not going to be chasing multi-million-dollar deals with Fortune 500 companies. I'll focus on small companies. I'll find local companies that I can help to do this. And we landed our first contract with a cancer care facility that I, through a colleague, and we were both kind of trying to get something going. And, I sold a $12,000 a month managed services deal before we called it managed services to manage 5 cancer facilities around the Metro Washington, D.C. area. That's a pretty great first contract. Like, that's real money you can do something with. And that was the first job. And it was like, okay, there's something here. Let me see if I can get a little something going. But God, it was a terrifying hustle because I didn't know anything about running a business. I didn't know any. I wasn't adept in reading profit and loss statements. I didn't understand accounting software. I didn't know contract law. Like, I had to learn everything on the fly, as most entrepreneurs will do in their version of the story. Right? Is you have to learn as you go. That was the launch of that business.
Yeah, and what was the kind of landscape like for this? What was it that kind of led you to go right, I'm going to just speak to this cancer facility? Were you like spraying and praying, or did you have like a plan of like, right, I'm going to go for pharmaceuticals because I know pharma companies have money and all that kind of stuff? Like, what was the game plan?
Oh, it was get anybody to pay us money. Like, it really was. like who could we get? That was good alignment, right? I've always tried to keep in touch with the people that I do previous business with or worked with. Like you always have to cultivate your network. And as I was looking to do something, a colleague of mine was also looking to start something in the medical space, and he had this larger vision of data management, and he needed somebody to run the networks for those customers. And so that was a perfect pairing of the two of us, because I had some of the experience in infrastructure management, and he had a larger eye to some of that data management on the far end. So he gave me the infrastructure work. So he was out doing that selling. It was a good match of the two. I was still hustling, and so Washington D.C. is full of associations and not-for-profits, as you might guess, lobbying the government. So there's a rich ecosystem of that, and my second sort of round of customers was all in the association space. So I had this sort of accidental specialty in association and healthcare because those were the areas we stumbled into first, and I just dove in. You just start learning, right? Learn on the fly, figure it out, spend a lot of time thinking and researching and being effective for customers, and the expertise comes.
How long did you run that business for? How long were you working at that business?
I did that for a decade. So that was 2002, and I sold it at the end of 2011. And it was a fun ride. Did all kinds of cool stuff. Like we grew it. I did an acquisition during that time frame, which was a huge disaster. Like did not go well. But I learned a lot. I wrote a book during that time frame. I was doing lecturing and helping other providers grow their business. I got involved in peer groups because I needed to learn from other people. So I joined a peer group. Got super involved with that. Like we acted as like a virtual board of directors for one another. Liked that so much. I helped the peer group organization launch into Europe. So I actually launched one in the their first European endeavors in the UK. So we launched a peer group there. I was a frequent speaker because I was always looking to learn. So the best way to learn is also teach. So I would go out and do all of that kind of stuff. And so, I'd grown that additional investment in business intelligence during that time. And so when I had a personal sense that it was a good time to sell and it was a time for me to change directions personally, I sold the business at the end of 2011.
Nice. Yeah, I was speaking to someone a couple months ago, and he was like, you should always run your business like you're planning to sell it. You just never know when you might want to get that kind of payday, whether it's a payday as in you've not been taking a salary the whole time, or you want to have, a bit of downtime, like you said, and follow some passions. Because let's be honest, if you're running a business, you can pretend that you're going to run a passion-based business, but realistically, it might be a business that, hey, I see a need for this, I'm making this business, let me hand it off to someone now where it's of use to them and will grow their business, or, I'm done with being at the reins of it. And I've had a fair few founders CEOs, all that kind of stuff that have been through the acquisition process, and everyone's acquisition story is completely different. For some people, it was one person, one deal, a bit of negotiating on the money, bang, life-changing money, they're off. But for other people, it's like 5 deals on the table, 3 get taken away, one's looking the best, and then at the last minute, it kind of becomes a bit of a compliance nightmare and all this kind of stuff. I'm wondering, what kind of acquisition story did you have? Was it simple and then you had kind of life-changing money, or was it like quite complicated and then you had a nice nest egg to say put a down payment on a house, or send your kids to college or something like that? I'm curious.
Your previous guest was way smarter than me because I did not prepare that business to be sold. I learned a lot during the process. For me, it was actually ended up being a pretty simple process because I reached out to some local fellow small business owners that did the same kind of thing. I had a long-standing relationship with another company that we'd just been friends. We, every year we would go out for a dinner and talk shop, and they would always joke, "Whenever you're ready to sell, Dave, let us know." And so I took him up on that offer. And when I was ready to sell, we sat down, and I took a real transparent approach to it. Like, we signed the NDA, and then the moment the deal was done, the deal was just being discussed, right? The moment I'd signed the NDA, I went full transparency. I gave them everything. You can have my client list, you can have my QuickBooks, you can have all my records, you can go through everything. Because, like this whole argument about, oh, you've got some major secret to save. Look, you're already talking and selling. Like, you need to let them get into due diligence pretty quickly. And you want the due diligence to be really intense and really harsh so that you can find out if there's a good match. And we found out that there was a pretty good match, particularly because I wanted to exit and didn't want to be involved. We put together the deal. It was a cash plus payout kind of deal. And I always describe it as, It wasn't life-changing money at the moment, but it has been life-changing moment over my lifetime because my wife and I took all of it and we put it into retirement.
Right.
And we said, we're putting this aside and it's going to get to work for us. But that means Dave, you still need a job. You'd better get a job day one. Like you're back at it. You're not done. But I'm gonna be really happy in 30 years, or it's less than that now, right? When I do retire, I will know that that money went to work for me instantly, and 30 years later, I've got some results from that.
Nice. So you've exited this business. It's happy days. You set yourself up for retirement. You're all good. Now you're out there teaching, lecturing, kind of just like you said, exploring that kind of avenue of yourself. But I'm
Oh, I took
curious
a
about.
job. I had a job
Oh,
within 2 weeks, sir.
what were you doing? What was the job?
So I hopped over to a vendor. So if I was in the IT services space, managed services space, so I went to one of the vendors that serves this space. And my basic premise is actually like you say, like, oh, you're out there teaching, lecturing. It's like I actually didn't feel I was well enough versed to be an expert to really do that and feel genuine about myself. And I said, I'm not done learning. I built one moderately successful business. I'd better go learn some more. I'm not done. So I went to work for a software vendor, and my job was helping managed services providers and IT services businesses run their companies better. Because the premise is that if I worked with them, they would buy more software because they were growing. And our software was consumption based and it based on the number of customers they had and the number of employees they had. So the better their businesses were, the more software they consumed. So that let me get really down and dirty and involved with teaching a lot of different managed services providers how to run their businesses. And the metric of success was their growth. And I did that for 2 years, and then we sold that business to AVG. I was on the management team. We sold it to AVG. Then I went over. I did it again, and I said, "Okay, that was an interesting one." And I said, "But I think I can do another one. I think I can do a better job of that." So I hopped to a company called GFI. We became Logic Now during that time frame. It was a 3-year run. Same job, bigger scale. I had more money. I had more staff. I had more to work with, and we grew that from 5,000 MSPs to 15,000 MSPs. We sold that business to SolarWinds 3 years later. So and then I stayed for 3 years post acquisition. So that was sort of my post entrepreneurs phase one. Was going and working for vendors for 8 years.
Yeah. And just for the listener out there that might not be tech savvy or up with the acronyms, what is an MSP?
It's a great question. It stands for a managed services provider. And the way I always describe this for those that aren't familiar with this space is, in business, somebody helps you with your technology. Big companies have an internal technology department, but generally smaller companies, they work with somebody else. They work with a company that specializes in this. They're generally known as managed services providers when they are professional organizations. It could be your cousin Jim does that helps out, right? It helps the owner, or it could be the son, the son of the owner, or some guy down the block that helps out. But if you're in the more professionalized version of that, it's a business and it's generally known as a managed services provider.
Yeah. So business was sold 2011, 2013, another sale / acquisition. And then, going forward, you're there, you're seeing that tech is here to stay. Tech is becoming an integral part of every business. And, I'm kind of wondering, you've got a different view of how a business runs and works efficiently from an IT perspective. So I'm wondering kind of what the biggest challenges you see people facing in smaller businesses when it comes to IT services.
They don't have enough resources. Like this is hard, right? Like so and technology has always gotten more capable, but also more complicated. And there's this sort of fallacy thought that it always gets cheaper. It never gets cheaper. We just spend your money better. It never goes down. Technology is more expensive. You should just get more return on it. The trick for smaller companies is that you just simply don't have as much to work with in raw, dollars or pounds numbers, right? It's when you get up to a sizable organization, you're talking 3, 4, 5% of your entire budget. That's enough to run a lot, right? Because you get benefits of scale. But in smaller businesses, it's just tough. You just don't have as much to work with. And you've got an increasing demand of real challenges. When I started doing this kind of stuff, security was important, but wow, it wasn't near the threat it is now. And you weren't dealing with possible kind of extinction level events when you messed up in security. You know, the worst thing that we might happen in when I started was Janice in accounting might delete something and we had to restore from backup. Now, Janice from accounting might click something and now your entire business gets ransomed or extorted. And that's just an incredible danger shift without the corresponding availability of more money to fight it.
And so at the moment there's a big focus on cybersecurity, and it's not even about making sure your business is the most secure. It's actually educating the most critical or most vulnerable point of the business, which is the people. And
yep, 100%.
There's people in a business now that have been in the workforce. Okay, computers have come along and they're like, well, do I really need to learn about computers? It's like, you do, because if you mess up, like you said, your business could be up for ransom. So I'm not sure if this is something you still do now, if it's something you did in your other job where you got acquired, but what are the kind of things that you have to teach, when I say lower level employees, I mean people that are less involved in the day-to-day IT services stuff, so that you're able to do your job properly?
Well, everybody's got to be, and by the way, it's at all levels. And I'll even sort of say with a smile, actually, some of the most risky people are the top ones, the executive management, because they have the most power. It is, a really good hacker now can use social engineering to convince a CEO or CFO to wire money to the wrong place. I'm less worried about Janice in accounting, and I'm more worried about, Jake, the CEO, authorizing something based on a scam. Like, that's actually where the risk, because it can come from any level of the organization, and it can come from any of your partners, and it can come from anybody. So you're exactly right. This is all about people education is the number one thing that we've got to spend our time on, and it's oftentimes it's literally just simple things. You need to think about something before you do it. And you're fighting your own inclinations. Those of us that if you're in any kind of business, you want to be helpful. You want to do a good job. You want to answer customer requests. You want to do right for the boss or finance. So your inclination is to be trusting. And that's why cyber criminals take advantage of that. They want to lure you into a false sense of security. Most of the time, when we looking at most of these major hacks that are happening now, it's all due to social engineering, meaning somebody has convinced someone to do something they shouldn't have done.
Nice. And, we asked for a definition of what MSP is, but you actually have a business called MSP Radio, where you launch your own podcast, or you have your own podcast called The Business of Tech. And so, what is the business of tech? Is it kind of a reflection of your business, or is it just kind of you doing like a news update on what's happening in the tech world? I'm curious.
Yeah, so after I did 10 years as my own entrepreneurship. I did 8 years on the vendor side, and I came out of that with a thought of I think there's a need for information for those that own and operate IT services companies like these MSPs and such, but even a little broader. It can go all the way up to government contractors, sometimes even internal IT departments, to think a little bit about what's happening in the news and how it applies to them. And so I said, and I think I can do this. I can provide some really interesting advice, guidance, insights that is very timely, and I can deliver it at scale, and I can do it digitally. Part of my job, and if think back to what I was talking about doing on the vendors, is I was helping these MSPs run their businesses better. And I flew around a lot. I'm a million miler on United, not by a brag, but because I traveled a freaking lot to go out and do a lot of classes, right? A lot of classes, a lot of education. And I looked and I said, I think what we're doing in digital media, podcasts, YouTube videos, I think I can reach more people more effectively through digital means and really great content than by getting on planes. And I'm going to try and build a business doing that. 4 years later, here I am. And the flagship is the podcast, the Business of Tech podcast, which is a daily 5 to 8 minute show where I cover 2 to 4 news stories a day and a piece called Why Do We Care? Where I take the news and I break it down and go, okay, here's the context. Here's why I think this is important, or what the angle is, or why I think this is important in your business if you're one of these operators of an IT services or a managed services business.
What made you decide to go daily? That is such a grind.
It was a dual element to this. So the first was there's so much news, there's so much to keep up with, and my basic thought was, I think a consumable 5 to 8 minute podcast every day will be better than like an hour-long news show every week. I think it'll be easier to get a habit of consuming that, and I'll get a better audience, an engaged audience where it's like super tight, super compressed, and it's daily. And by the way, I don't mind saying that also meant I had enough ad slots to build a business around.
Yeah, of course. That's what media businesses are. It's all an ad sales game or a community, selling to your community. That's what it is. Let's be honest here. Yeah.
And so this was a math, right? So this was math. It was like, I think the product will be better by doing 5 to 8 minutes every single day with an ad versus an hour with 2 or 3 ads. Like I get more ad slots, but I also get better engagement from my listeners, right? And I know I can become part of their daily consumption and become a really good habit. And those are what you do this too, right? Anybody who knows who's a content creator knows that regular cadence makes a huge difference to loyalty. Well, I just said I'm going to turn that number up to 10, right? Or turn it up to 11. And I'm going to say I'm going to do one every day. And so I do every business day, and then I do interview episodes on the weekend. So I do 6 shows a week in order to produce it. So, but this is my only job. This is all I do.
Wow. See, listen, anybody listening here, obviously you're not listening to become a podcaster, I hope, because you should be out there making your own podcast as opposed to just sitting here listening to this one and thinking, I'm going to get all the podcast tips.
We need people to listen.
Yeah, you need people to listen. That's true. But yeah, that is amazing that you're like, right, this is how it's going to work. You had a business plan. A lot of people will start a podcast and go, yeah, I'm just going to kind of freewheel it, see how it goes and feel it out. It's like, no, you're like, I'm speaking to this audience. I'm speaking to them for this long because of this reason. Perfect stuff right there. And
it's good marketing, right? And I don't mind saying, like, part of my previous jobs was learning marketing and being really good at delivering message. When I was on the vendor side, my job was to get good content into these managed services providers' hands. So I thought a lot about, like, well, how do we reach them? How do we communicate them? How do we define who the audience are? What do we want them to do? And I just took those ideas and I said, if I'm going to be serious about this had better be a real business. And it's got to have a business plan, and it's got to be something that I do, and I have to define my why. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan in terms of the his book and his thinking is define your why. My why every single day is to get up and educate these managed services providers and be part of their rhythm, be a trusted advisor to them, and I got to be there every single day to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a great mission to be on, because that is something that's a recurring thing with a lot of guests on here. It's like, if you don't have a why, one day you'll wake up and look around and be like, what's going on here? And you need to constantly be refining your why and finding out, where am I going, or at least where am I hoping to get to? And, like you said there as well, marketing and sales is the life and like blood of a business. If you don't market it properly, you won't make any sales. If you don't make any sales, then, your business is going to fall flat on its face. But
look, it's dirty. It feels something dirty to talk about, right? But like, money's the fuel. Money's the fuel of the business. It's not a bad thing. It's okay to ask for the business. It's okay to market. It's okay to talk about money. Like, these are all fine. I was smiling and go, just don't be crass, right? Like the point of it is like, people like to buy, like they just do. Make it easy for them to give you money. Like if you're selling, you're making it real easy for them to give you money.
Yeah, and the thing I found recently, especially with a lot of podcasts, they're getting big download numbers, and adverts are being placed. But you look at it and you go, this is not a good fit for me. Like, I'm listening to a finance podcast, and you're now advertising a Blue Chew to me, or a Manscaped shape. I'm sorry if you take those type of ads. If you do, then fair enough. But my point is,
it's not a good. I would talk to, and I'll say it because I'm transparent with my audience. Like, look, if anybody wants to advertise on my show, they're welcome to do so. But I can tell you very clearly who my audience is and what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Right. And I'll say like it is, these are the kinds of advertisers that succeed on my show. They're generally looking to talk to managed services providers, IT services. They offer some kind of B2B solution. They are in that space. There is honor in advertising. And if any of those big advertisers want to advertise on my show, they're welcome to do so. And I don't mind saying, like, I fill available ad space with larger national campaigns, that come in and fill the ad space, because the worst thing that can happen for me is one goes out with no ad because nobody makes any money. But it's different, right? And I'm trying to be really transparent with both my audience and with my advertisers of what the audience looks like. And by the way, they want that. Like any good marketer will tell you, like, they want you to be really, really clear about who the audience is and what the message they're looking for is.
Yeah, 100%. And, kind of not pivoting, but kind of moving in a direction that's still in the podcast space. What are the current trends that you're seeing? I don't want to say the forbidden word, but I might have to say it. Obviously, AI is massive. Cybersecurity is still massive. You know what I mean? What are the trends that you're seeing as an insider in this kind of managed IT services, MSP space?
Yeah, we're talking. I mean, shockingly, we're talking tons of AI right now.
Yeah,
cybersecurity's been a staple for a long time. I don't mind saying I still talk a lot of remote work and the dynamics of work because it's all technology enabled.
Yeah.
So but it's ultimately being a good manager is what makes good remote work. And I think there's an opportunity for technology providers to deliver good consulting and good guidance to businesses on how to be good at remote work. And that's a competitive advantage. And you asked earlier about, like, well, what's the about technology investments? Like, I want people to spend their money on technology and get good business results. That's the measurement. And these MSPs and IT services companies, they're in the business of doing good business outcomes. We're talking a ton of AI, right? Because I think right now you've got a real interesting space where a ton is happening at incredible velocity. And it's happening without necessarily the central control of either IT or senior leadership in businesses. People are just doing it, right? They're just rolling out stuff. ChatGPT showed up and everyone started using it, and business owners aren't really sure what's happening. The actual opportunity right now is to work with business owners and define their ethical frameworks for it. Where is AI appropriate? What is not? What are the guidance for that? What is not appropriate? How do we educate our employees to be useful with these tools? How do we be effective in delivering? Can we measure that? Can we make sure that we're not getting ourselves into legal risk, compliance risk, data risk? Answering all of those questions right now are where forward-thinking businesses are figuring that out so they can be effective with the technology as it continues to evolve.
100%. And you touched on something there about remote work. Now, if anyone here has been reading the headlines or seeing what people are saying on social media and LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff, it's actually hybrid work now. Remote first is not really the move. It's all about hybrid work. And so I'm wondering, what is your view on what an actual hybrid working environment is? Is that a quarterly meetup? Is it 2 days in the office, 3 days at home? What is your view on hybrid work and what it is, Dave?
My view on this is sort of an interesting one, that asking that question is asking the wrong question, because it isn't about the frequency or the time. What it's actually about is building a culture of communication that leverages the tools and placement effectively. There's a time and a place to be face-to-face with people. There's also a time and a place for remote. And the big advantage of remote work is offering flexibility to employees to make sure that they can take advantage of available time, and they can have a better engagement at home. They can do better work-life balance. They can be much more flexible with their life choices, and get more effective work from productivity. And that requires intentional investments in good management, and to make sure that the business leaders are focused on, are we building good culture? Are we building good communication? Are our managers doing a good job of managing people where they are? Are we flexible enough as an organization to build a system that each individual manager is empowered to work with their talent, grow that talent at a level that is appropriate for them? By the way, everything I'm just describing, really hard. Like, this isn't easy to do. And which is why I like it. I like hard problems because if you can invest in hard problems and be good at solving them, you have built a competitive advantage. And what I sort of push back is anybody that's having this debate around, well, what does hybrid mean? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Do we get together quarterly? You're actually not asking the core question. You're asking, the core question should be, are we building an organization that is really good at managing people? Period. It's not a new problem. It just has new subtleties and options based on technology.
Yeah, and one thing that tech has enabled is people to work asynchronously. So we don't all need to be in the same place at the same time, shuffling bits of paper around. It can be something as simple as, I've done my bit, I put a message in Slack, or I, tick a box and it sends you a message that, hey, this bit's done, you can get onto this, and the time frame is there for everybody to see. It's like, okay, this is going to take 5 days. This part should take 1 to 2 days, which means this part will take another 1 to 2 days. We should be done by this day. And, I think that's something that a lot of businesses are kind of stuck in, is doing a lot of manual work, which is like, we don't live in a very manual world. Imagine if you went to tap your credit card or your debit card, and then they're like, oh, hang on a sec, let me just call the bank. Hello, has so-and-so got enough money for this thing? Oh, they do. Okay, hang on a second, let me call my bank. Hey, I'm going to receive a payment from so-and-so. Can you make sure that you're ready to receive this payment? It's all very much like instant, and we can just do things remotely via the internet, all this kind of stuff. So I'm wondering for you, what is something that you think most business owners could do today to kind of remove the manual kind of old school way of working from their workplace, to get a step closer to that hybrid and or remote workforce?
They really need to understand what asynchronous work is and really dive into how you manage differently asynchronous work. This is much more, it's really easy to manage time, right? That's the fallback that everybody, oh, you must work 42 hours, right? Like, you've got to get in that exact time. It is real easy to measure just time. It is actually hard to measure asynchronous work. And that's why most people don't do it, is because it is measurements around that become very difficult. You become very nervous at the idea of, well, I'm not keeping an eye on how much they're actually working. And how do I know the work is getting done? That's where the nervousness happens, and you have to be very intentional on doing that. And when I talk to those that are thinking about this, yes, managers, you are going to have to learn a new set of skills. And this is different and is a different way of managing, and it requires systems, right? Which is why it's a technology-enabled one, is that way you can use systems to measure progress and to watch, as you just described, to watch that project management. But that's a different set of skills than just sort of saying, well, I'm going to be in here, I'm going to make sure they do their 42 hours a week, and that if they just do that, I know by default we hit enough. Yep, that's not going to be good enough anymore. And you don't get to see them anymore. You're not Bill Lumberg walking around with your cup of coffee checking in on the TPS reports anymore, because that's not effective. You're going to have to do it in a way where you may not be able to see them, and you're going to have to build in trust into the system that you're managing.
Yeah. I feel like as well, a lot of, leaders and managers, they kind of operate like either a prison warden or a teacher, where they're like, herding people in a direction and making sure they're behind this door and they get to this place and do that thing. And it's like, realistically, you should just be almost like how you grow a plant. You water it a bit, you watch, you go, oh, that's not right. Okay, let's, pull that leaf off and all that kind of stuff, and make sure that you guide something in the way it should be, as opposed to kind of force it to go your way. I don't know what your view on that type of leadership is, but
yeah, my view on this is I've always been my personal best, and I've seen this as the best leaders I've ever worked for and worked with, when the leader views them as their job as removing obstacles. My job when I managed a team was to keep things out of my team's way. And the best I could do to anticipate problems and remove those potential obstacles from them so they could move as fast as they needed to move was when things were going at their best. Managers too often think they have to push employees. I don't think that's the way it's done. I actually think what you're doing is creating space for them to run. Because if you've made sure that when they start running, they're not going to be things in their way that they stumble on, they are going to be incredibly more powerful and more effective. And by the way, you build incredible trust when they know that they can just start moving and you don't have their back, you're the wind in their sails. you're the bit that is making sure that they're not going to crash into a boulder or they're not going to go off the edge of a cliff. You're doing a good job of making sure that obstacles are out of their way.
And with your business, obviously you are the leader of your business, you are the top of the tree and the talent in the front as well. I assume you have a team, and this is again an assumption. I'm assuming they might be remote. What does that look like for you, and how did you kind of build this team out over the last 4 years? Bearing in mind, we had the forbidden word that, happened, the pandemic. What was that like?
I have exactly 0 employees.
Oh, okay.
In this business. I work with freelancers, and again, I take the strategy of my job is to empower them to get what I need done as much as possible. So I've got people that I work with on my web presence. I've got a producer who works on does editing on my interview episodes, who helps with the graphics, helps like pull things together. I actually do the daily editing. I'm an editor. I edit my own news show every single day. So I get help on the interview episodes and the produced pieces when we go out in the field. I get a lot of help on, I use Upwork and Fiverr type people for graphic design, for data entry. I've got a great accountant who is I work on a contract basis with. I assemble a team and I embrace what I talk about. Everything is all systems managed, right? So I have systems that track all of this stuff. I make sure that I keep work accountable. These are my expectations. These are the deliverables. This is the deadline. This is when I need it by, and I expect feedback on adjustments. And for me, the number one piece that I look for in those that I work with is I like no surprises. We can take changes all day long. Surprises are the problem. Deadlines are useful to keep us all in sync, and keep everything on track. But by the way, I'm also reasonable about understanding that things change, plans change. As long as I'm not surprised, I can plan for anything. And so that's the way that I approach it.
Yeah, and I'm wondering as well, kind of trying to get a better view of how your podcast works and how the whole business works from this perspective. What do you do to engage with your audience, and what does that look like for you? Why do you engage with them, and in what ways?
I listen a lot. So I don't mind saying, like, I always call it sort of the listening posts, right? So I've got listening posts all around the internet that I'm listening to managed services providers and IT services providers. So I'm listening and lurking in a lot of the places where they're having conversations. So I make sure that I'm listening really intently to make sure I understand what the audience is talking about and what trends they care about, so that I'm engaged in thinking about the problems they've got. Now, my job also as their analyst is to anticipate problems they didn't see, right? I have the ability to look at market data and analysis and research papers, and I've got time to do this that they don't have. So my value to them is the aggregation and analysis, but I also have to listen. Direct listenership is incredibly important. So I'm responsive to LinkedIn. I'm responsive to YouTube comments. I am responsive to email. I'm easy to find. My calendar is posted. Like, in terms of if somebody wants to get on my calendar, there's a link, right? It's not hard to find me and not hard to get on my calendar. So I invite people to reach out to me. I invite questions to come in. I've got a Patreon community. So I have some direct supporters that contribute to what I do. And wow, do I listen to them. They get videos early. Well, they are. But that's also part of the value, right? Is they get part of the value of what they get is not only do they get some of my content early, they get access to me. And I said, like, I'm on call. If you need me, I am there for you. You're giving me whatever amount of money. I call it the pay what you want model. Is whatever you're looking to give me, I will listen. I will absolutely take it. There's a direct private calendar link where my Patreon supporters can get on my calendar. Anytime they need me, I'm available for them. And that's a special, wider availability calendar, too. So it's about actively engaging and then being in all of the places, right? So I listen in as many places that are at. I make sure that I engage in defined places. Like these are the places that I'm actively involved and I engage in, and I make sure that I'm responsive to everything that they say so that they know it's worth saying something. And I quip all the time. I never claim to be right. Is my job here is not to be right all the time. I do the why do we care analysis, and that tells you my perspective on why I picked the story, what I think the direction is. And I tell anybody who listens to me, if you think I'm 100% wrong and you go forth and you run a business strategy that is exactly the opposite of mine and you make piles of money, I want to hear all about it. And I will applaud you every single time by running the anti-Dave strategy, right? Like, totally viable. I'm just about getting your thinking started so that you can make a decision about the right direction. Because, man, there's not more than one way to do this. There's a million ways to do this. And if you've got a better way based on hearing me and thinking I'm wrong, more power to you.
That is a perfect way to say it. And obviously, with running a daily news show as well as doing interviews, you're clearly doing a lot of research and, reading and all that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering whether or not you're like a book reader, or you listen to a lot. Well, you probably do listen to a lot of podcasts. It's kind of a bug. But yeah, I'm wondering where you do your learning and, what kind of things, probably not business or tech focused, but, personal development, business, or, lifestyle focused that you've kind of learned or read that have really changed your life over the decades that you've been doing what you've been doing.
I'm an avid reader. I do like to read. I read fiction a little, as much as I can on that, and more just to make sure that you reset your brain. Like, I think you need to immerse yourself in other stuff, and I like fiction's fun for creative writing, for coming up with just sort of out of the box thinking. I'm an avid daily reader. Like I read the paper. But I read digitally. I mean, I read the Washington Post every single day, in RSS feed, consumed with all of the other things that I'm reading. But I deliberately make sure that I read the paper. I make sure to make time for long form stuff. Sit down and read long form stuff to try and make sure that I'm engaged that way. You're exactly right. I'm a big podcast guy. I also make sure that I have active times that I'm not engaged electronically. I manage it. I do not ever feel that I'm addicted to my phone, and my screen time numbers would say as much, but I actually make deliberate choices about the way that I use it. I'm an active user of Apple's focus modes. So like in the evening, my phone has no notifications. Yeah. Just period. There's nothing important. That's time to watch TV, spend time with my wife, play with the cat, go for a walk, see some friends. I'm actively not one of those people that I'm out. If we're out together having a drink, you're not going to see my phone. Period. I'm going to be with you. That's what that time is about. Yeah. So I make sure that I'm deliberate about those kinds of choices, and I find it makes my brain better. It just makes me better engaged. It makes me think about it. Right now, you and I are having a conversation. There are no notifications. No one's heard email, Bing. I turn all that stuff off. Yeah. It's
very good to be present. If you're not present when you're in a conversation with somebody or in a moment with somebody, you actually might come away from that and not realize the smaller things that might have been wrong with them, or remember the things that they said that were great that you'll talk about next time or follow up on. And, it makes for better relationships if you just for the hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is you're with somebody, just forget about your phone. Everything that's in there will still be there once you're away from that person and you have your alone time and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I always quip. There's always more email. There's always another text. There's always another Slack. There's always another status update.
Yeah.
None of them are that important. And by the way, most stuff, the vast majority of things, not actually that timely.
Yeah.
The information is just as useful in an hour or tomorrow than it was right now.
100%.
It will be just as good, and it's and I've said this for a long time. I'm in computers because I like the technology, but these are tools for my benefit, not for other people's benefit. I don't have a smartphone for your benefit. I have a smartphone for my benefit. You are not allowed to interrupt my day with my tool. like that's the way that I look at it and say, like, no, that's my tool for accessing information and being productive when I want to do it. You other people do not get to hijack that.
Yeah. Unless you're on the special Patreon that, that you've paid access to. I'm joking. That's not how that works.
Well, but by the way, like, and I quip about this. I always have this thought of, I have a rate for everything.
Yeah. Well, time is money.
Time is money. If you want my attention, there's absolutely rates for that can have me, like, but nothing is just given away. Like, that is in that I have things that cost no money. Things like my podcast, like getting on, like, you want my attention. There are lots of ways to do it without paying me any money, but you want my attention on demand. Well, there are rates for that. By the way, you have to outpace my wife, right? Like who commands a certain level of the attention process too. Like, but even that. So as I look at it and say, like, it's all about value exchange here, right? Is that I try and be more valuable than what people are paying me for. And by the way, I have the advantage in some cases if I give away a lot of this for free. Except I don't, right? I'm taking your attention, and I'm super respectful. I understand I'm taking 5 to 8 minutes of my listeners, assuming they listen at 1x speed, and nobody does.
Yeah.
But I'm taking 5 minutes. I'm taking 5 minutes a day from them. I better deliver value greater than that time. That's got to be something I do every single day. Because, by the way, not only do I take five minutes, I ask you to listen to an ad.
Yeah.
So I'd better deliver some real value every single day. And I think about that value exchange all the time. As long as I'm delivering more than what I cost, I'm always doing a good job.
And Dave, following on from the great conversation we've been having, I'm curious for you, what is it about what you do that brings you the most joy?
I get to help people. Like, actually, I'm in small business, right? I love small business. You're based in London, I'm based in DC. Small businesses are the vast majority of both countries' economies. They make up, like, most people are employed by small businesses. They actually drive the everyday action of most things that are happening are driven by small companies. And every single day I get to do a little something that helps some small businesses. And if I can do a little bit more that helps a bunch of small businesses, that has incredible reach. And that's what gets me up every single day. Is there's a bunch of managed services providers, IT services companies that if I can do a little something to help them today, that's a pretty great job. And that's a pretty great way to spend your time.
Where can the people find you online?
I am easy to find. All of my stuff is consolidated at the website businessof.tech, name for the website. There's a big blue subscribe button to get me on all of the various platforms. There's social links for every single way you can find me. I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn. I push most people there, particularly because I'm business focused. That's the easiest way to find me, but I am on all of your favorite platforms. I do a couple of newsletters that come out, on an either daily basis if you want the news stories, or a weekly basis if you want long form. The podcast, of course, is the flagship, and that's available on whatever podcasts are found, or on YouTube at youtube.com/MSP Radio.
Thank you for listening to People Explained. New episodes come out every Monday. We would appreciate it if you gave us a review on Apple Podcasts and shared this episode with a friend.